Hey everybody, and welcome back to Season 2 of Pen to Pod. It has been so long since I've been able to bring these episodes to you guys, and I'm so excited about the authors we have lined up for Season 2. We kick off Season 2 with Veronica Bane talking about her debut book, Difficult Girls. Veronica Bane spent her formative teen years working at a popular theme park. Following days spent as a princess and an usher, she graduated from Chapman University with a BFA in creative writing. Since then, she has worked as a high school English teacher, so literally one of the hardest jobs ever, in Lincoln Heights, California. When she's not writing, she's exploring Los Angeles with her husband and their beloved dog, Bodhi. Difficult Girls came out this summer, so this podcast episode should be launching in August, the start of the season, and Difficult Girls came out on July 8th of this year. Difficult Girls is a contemporary YA thriller, and it's all about a teen girl's attempt at social reinvention for herself. She goes through a harrowing incident at her school, and then she throws herself into this new job at a theme park, just like Veronica worked at one. And it starts to take a deadly turn when a coworker disappears, and she learns that she may have been the last person to see this missing girl, and she's really the only one who's caring enough to take it into her own hands. This is a very funny and thrilling debut, which I think is such a hard mix to hit in a thriller by bringing in those moments of ease with great characters, well-rounded characters, very funny, but I also was kept on the edge of my seat. I read Difficult Girls after I interviewed Veronica because I interviewed before it came out, and I loved this book. We talk a lot about what being a difficult girl means and what that meant for the characters in this book and the creation process, and Veronica even talks in this episode about how Greta was quote unquote unlikable. And I loved Greta. And, Veronica says it in this episode as well. You'll hear her talk about it, but she is a teenager and she is kind of boy obsessed and she wants to be liked so badly. And I just think that is relatable to teens. And I think Greta is so well written and you're rooting for her to solve this mystery, but you're rooting for her to overcome this thing that happened to her in the past and for her to make friends at this new job. And there's just so much happening in Difficult Girls. I absolutely loved it. As someone who also has worked in a theme park, I actually did the Disney College program in college. It was so fun to kind of revisit that space. Just the atmosphere feels very nostalgic for me as well as a reader. So if you love thrillers and you like complex female characters, I highly recommend reading Difficult Girls. And not just highly recommend, I mean, you should go pick it up. If you haven't picked it up, go pick it up right now. Read it, give it a rating and a review on Goodreads, and just share it with everybody because I absolutely loved it. On top of Difficult Girls, really just talking to Veronica was such a breath of fresh air. Veronica has been in this industry for around 10 years. She has worked as a ghostwriter on countless of books. She's been writing for a very long time. Just listening to her advice truly was amazing. Just being able to have this conversation with her. Veronica, if you're listening, thank you so much for talking with me. I really enjoyed every single second, and I say it in the episode, and it did come true. When I edited this episode, I was writing down all of the things that Veronica says in this episode because I just want to remember them for myself. I feel like every time I interview an author, it's always something I personally as a writer need to hear as well. And, we talk a lot about perseverance and resilience and what it takes to push forward and what failure really means and what it can do for your career and how the process is the art of the book and how a book can change and it's a living, breathing thing. And just everything Veronica says is top notch. Every writer needs to hear it. So whether you are a reader and you found this because you read Difficult Girls and you want to learn more about the writer behind the scenes, then this is for you. And of course, if you are a writer, Veronica just shares amazing advice for any newer and seasoned writer out there. I hope you guys are ready. Hope you have your drink of choice. You're buckled in and ready to go on this ride. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Veronica Bane. Okay, I have all my drinks in front of me, ready to go.
I know the emotional support drinks are ready.
I have the emotional support water bottle. I have my remnants of my morning coffee still. I have some tea.
Absolutely.
We have it all.
Perfect. I'm so excited. I just have water today, but that's abnormal for me. So
That's okay. That's okay. This giant thing is just
I
full of
have one of those too. It's just
water.
downstairs. Why am I not using my water bottle? Unclear.
Some days I don't want to either.
Yeah.
Some days I just put it in a cup. But like I got this Awala because all the cool kids were getting it, but I didn't
hmm
realize I got like the biggest one.
That is a chonky one. I was worried if I got that one that it wouldn't fit in my cup holder.
It
And
doesn't.
okay.
It doesn't. It's the worst. I'm actually so sad. I just bought an Awala because I was like, oh, these are cute. Like this seems
Yeah.
functional. No, it's massive.
Yeah. Well,
So it's like my desk water bottle.
yeah. Well, I love that. I
Yeah,
love that. Everyone
absolutely.
should have a desk water bottle.
I agree. I agree. I do love to start on my interviews
hmm
talking about place. I think because when I write, I love thinking of place as a setting and I love learning where people are from or where they're planting roots. And looking at your bio, since you've grown up in California, you
hmm
reside now in Los Angeles. So I just would love to hear how you think California has impacted you and what you write about.
I love that question. So I grew up in San Diego, California, and then I worked my way up the coast. I went to college at Chapman University, which is in Orange County. And then I moved to Los Angeles over a decade ago, and that's where I've been ever since. And most of my books have actually been set in sort of San Diego. If you have read Difficult Girls, it is not a surprise that I think I called it Rancho Paloma is San Diego in disguise. And so I loved growing up in San Diego, and it had a very specific, just kind of vibe. We were so close to the beach in a way that there is a beach technically near me in Los Angeles, but it's a real production unless you live right next to the water in Los Angeles to get to the beach. Traffic is a battle, whereas when I grew up, it was just 15 minutes after school. You could impromptu just go walk around the beach or walk along the coast highway, and that kind of freedom and just even the way the air felt, and you always could kind of feel the ocean air in some way around you. I wrote so many books with that surrounding me, and so it just felt like a natural place to put most of the books that I've written.
I really like that descriptor. Like the ocean is always around you. Yeah, because you can like taste it, you can feel it,
hmm
smell it. I love that.
It's just also a little cooler. And again, I love Los
Mhm.
Angeles. I love having so much art and creativity and being able to go, see a movie just at any kind of rep theater at any time that you want. Things are open past 6, which is something I did not grow up with. And I love that. And there's an energy and a history to Los Angeles that I adore, but just the hug that I feel like I get the second that I cross into San Diego County, because I still go there 2 to 3 times a month. It's unmatched. And I really wanted that for the backdrop for specifically Difficult Girls, because it
Mhm.
is based on a theme park, or the story is set at a theme park primarily, and I worked at a theme park growing up in San Diego, and so I wanted that to feel similar. I needed Greta to have kind of that similar, that kind of unrest that I feel
Yeah.
like in San Diego I was feeling at the time.
Yeah. No, I think that's why I love starting out with place because I really do think that I don't know. I've interviewed a lot of authors now, and I think either consciously, like it seems like you're pretty conscious of how it's seeping into your work. And some are like, oh, you're right. Like, yeah, I've been actually putting this as a backdrop for all my stories. So I always think it's cool how place bleeds into what we're writing, whether we're aware of it or not.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's no way that it can't. At least for me, it's always its own character in the book. And I really enjoyed, again, it's Rancho Paloma, but it's like we're not. I didn't have any desire to kind of hide the inspiration. I wanted it to be its own place because then you can kind of make up your own rules and some bad things go down in Rancho Paloma. But I wanted it to be its own character, and San Diego is very much its own character. And I remember even when I was talking about, there's a scene where they talk about the beaches in the book, and my editor, who is also from San Diego, was talking to her assistant because her assistant was saying, I don't know why it's such a big deal about which beach you go to. And both my editor and I were like, oh no, it's a big deal which beach you go to. It's a very big deal. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's great too that you can have, I don't know, that kind of little pieces of your past in this new story, which is really exciting. And with past, I feel like you just have to ask it. You have to ask it on a writing podcast of just, when did you start writing? When did you know you wanted to be a writer? Or was there a moment you can remember that kind of clicked for you?
yeah, I mean, I've been writing for as long as I can remember. I should say I've been telling stories for as long as I can remember. I recall my mom, reading The Three Little Pigs to me and me being like, I could come up with a better ending. However old I was when I heard that, I was like, no, that's not it. That's not it. I've got notes. And then I remember my first kind of piece that I put down to paper was a poem that I wrote about my sister's puppy when I was 7. And I remember reading it aloud, and I found a picture of me reading it aloud, and I was like, oh no, this is it. This is what we're doing. And I just kind of never lost that. I was always telling some kind of story and writing something. And I was a creative writing major. And thank goodness that my parents were like, sure, go do that. And so I can't remember a time when I wasn't coming up with some kind of
Mhm.
story.
That's great. I also was a creative writing major, so I'm also blessed that my parents were like, do it. Did you know then going right into college, you were like, I'm going to declare creative writing, or did you like figure that out in college?
I remember sitting down with my high school counselor. I had no idea what college I wanted to go to. I was not one of those students that had kind of been raised on, oh, I'm going to this school or this is my dream school. Instead, I went to him and I said, I want to write. I don't care where I go. I want to write. And so find me a school with a good creative writing program, please. I wasn't quite as bossy as I'm making myself sound, but
You were nice about it.
I was very nice about it, but I was very much, this is what I want to do. And he said, well, if you want to stay in Southern California, Chapman's one of the best writing programs. And so I said, that's it. That's me. That's where I want to go. And thank goodness I got in because I really attached to that.
That's amazing. Do you feel like you've taken a lot from your creative writing degree? Like, do you feel like you're still building upon things that you learned then?
Yeah, I had a professor in college, and I went into college as I think a lot of students who are like me, and I say this because now I'm also a teacher, but students who were used to certain parts being easier. Like in high school, I could procrastinate. I have ADHD. Didn't know it in high school, but I could procrastinate, especially on my English work. I couldn't procrastinate on my science or math, but I did anyway, and I suffered the consequences. But for English, I really could kind of wait on it, and I could turn in work that was still pretty good. And then when I got to college, it was just this big realization that, oh no, I couldn't. And so I tried it with this professor where he wanted us to read these short stories and then do these very detailed outlines of the process and what the writer was doing and their techniques. And honestly, now as a teacher, I'm like, that was a great assignment. But at the time I was like, no. So I skimmed that short story, and I think I spent maybe 30 minutes before class on this outline. It was awful. And at the time, I don't know if students still have to do this, but I didn't have a printer in my dorm, so we had to print from the library. So I rushed it so that I could print from the library because we had to have printed copies and then bring that to class. And I turned it in, and it was the first kind of big creative writing assignment I think I'd turned in. And he did a system where it was plus, check, and I think it was like check plus and then check minus. And that was the worst one that you could get, was the check minus. And mine came back and it was a check minus. And I was like, what are you talking about? This is my major. This is what I want to do. And it was really kind of this moment where I kind of had to understand that if I wanted to do this for a career and I wanted this to be what I got really good at, then I had to put in the work, and I had to put in the work for every single assignment. And I needed to put care into what I was doing. And he was not going to accept the bare minimum. And oh my gosh, even when I tried, I wasn't getting the check pluses. And I was so mad. And I went to my advisor and I was like, I need to be changed out of this class. This professor is terrible. And I didn't know at the time, but my advisor and this professor were very good friends. So I'm sure in his head, he was like, this girl. But he told me, he's like, stick with it, try. And so I did. And I think to this day, the reason that I am able to be a professional writer is in large part because of that professor. I took multiple classes with him after. He just really set a high standard and, set the tone that if we were going to be bringing in work, it better be our very best work. And so I have kept that with me. I do really as clean as I can, as clean of a first draft as I can, because I'm kind of putting the thought into every word as it comes out.
Yeah. Okay, now I have so many questions. I relate. I also have ADHD, didn't find out till I was an adult. And I loved school, but I also struggled with it. Like I would, same thing, procrastinate homework up until like the class before in high school and got away with it. And yeah, you can't do that in creative writing because creative writing, I feel like is a different output than like a lot of other like high school homework, right? So you have to put actual thought into it instead of 30 minutes before. So I definitely did that in college too. Having a creative writing degree, I feel like especially in undergrad, it's mostly focused on like the short story because it's the easiest thing to teach. How do you feel like that has prepared you for novel writing? Because I feel like they're just two very different writing skills, but I think it's really interesting that you also have that background of like short story knowledge.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of the stories that I studied in creative writing, now I teach as a high school English
That's
teacher.
really cool.
And I get to also teach them to my creative writing students. And I really do think that with a short story, and I also did screenplays, which I'm so grateful for, but it's really about economy of language. Every single word on that page is fighting for its place to exist on that page. And you cannot, at least in the short stories that I have enjoyed and connected with, and enjoyed is kind of a not completely accurate word because I don't know if you enjoy the yellow wallpaper, but but I see something new every time that I teach it, and I'm just kind of in awe of that level of language and commitment to the words and how they're moving and how you develop character in such a short amount of time, which I think is actually very beneficial for novelists because I read a lot of when I have the opportunity to help new writers. I feel like I see a lot of new writers finding their way into the scene through the scene. And I'm guilty of this too. I feel like we've all done this at some point, but where they spend kind of pages and pages discovering who the character is, painting the background, and in a short story, you don't have that luxury. You don't have that space. You have to just use very specific words. Like I will never forget that same professor was talking about a line and the difference between her eyes looked and her eyes cut. And just that change from one verb to another and how distinct that portrays the character and the action. And so I try to carry that with me to writing novels. I really try to make sure that every scene that's on the page is there because I want it to be and I think it belongs.
So how do you not absolutely spiral out writing your first draft?
Well, I will say that the thing I always tell my students is you can't edit what doesn't exist. And there's a great quote from Shannon Hale that I'm probably going to butcher in some way here, but essentially she talks about how you have to put the sand in the sandbox before you can make the castle. And that is something I also keep in mind. And I will be chanting it to myself as I write the first draft. You can't edit what doesn't exist. Just put it on the page. And especially because a lot of times what I will write, I will have the same problems that I mentioned with beginning writers, where you realize you've written 4 pages of beautiful characterization and setting that does not need to be there right away. And you can take it out and put it somewhere else. And I do like to do a lot of discovery writing at the beginning of a project. I have an outline. We can talk about that later. But I like to have a lot of time to just play in the voice of the character and figure out who they are. And once I have a strong sense of their voice and I have the outline, usually the process moves fairly quickly for the first draft, usually.
Yeah, that I needed to hear that. Whenever I talk to different authors, it's always like what I need to hear. I always find first drafts so painful.
Yeah.
For me, it's like because I take a long time from conception to like writing the first draft. So it's kind of like the story has like made a home. They've like
Yeah.
unpacked in my brain, and I'm getting them to move out, and it's like really painful because moving sucks. So yeah, I feel like the first drafts are always horrible. But once I hit revisions, I'm like, that's smooth sailing from there.
Love revisions, and I specifically love line edits because I like when
Mhm.
all the big set pieces are set, that
Yeah.
they're not moving. We're not moving this giant chapter around. We're not adjusting POV. We're just really getting into fine tuning and making what's on the page shine. So,
Mhm.
right now, I am currently in dev edits or developmental edits for a project, and I am anxious to be in line edits.
Inline editing.
So I am looking forward to that. And I will say, I go back and forth with whether or not I love drafting or I
Mm,
don't. I definitely don't hate drafting, but there is something about those low moments when you have to be like, oh, it's going to be fine. Like, just get to the end.
yeah.
And it's hard sometimes to remind yourself that you have the tools and the skills to make it what it needs to be when you do get there.
Yeah, I like how you said that you have to kind of like chant that to yourself, like a reminder. I think that is like most of the first draft. It's like,
Mhm.
you can do this. And it doesn't matter what story, right? It could be like your first, it could be your 10th. It's every time you sit back down, you're like, okay, we can do this. Even though it doesn't feel like we can, we can. And then we can move forward.
Nobody needs to see the first draft. It
Yeah.
doesn't need to be something that you show. And I think a lot of writers, and I will give this advice and no one will take it. Absolutely zero people listening will take it because that is the way of it. But you do not have to think of the end product for your first book that you ever write. You don't have to think about, am I
Mm,
self-publishing it? If I'm traditionally publishing it, the first book that you write, I think in a lot of ways needs to just teach you how to write. Like
yeah.
it just needs to show you that you can do it. And I have a lot of writing friends that I've seen over the years get so attached to that first book and what it will be that they put so much pressure on it that then they can't let it just be a teacher. It has to be something
Mm,
else. And that doesn't mean that when you get to the end, something will happen with it. I hope that it does. But letting that first book just be a book and then shelving it or putting it aside while then you write another book, to me is a valuable part of the process.
I can see why you're an English teacher now. I would have adored to have you as a high school English teacher. That's amazing. I think that that definitely makes sense. I think, especially with, I mean, social media and like the rise of book talk,
Oh,
especially,
yes.
obviously we get excited about readers holding our
Mhm.
books in their hands. Like, that's amazing. But I do think sometimes it's hard to remember, like, this is an art form and the art is in the process. And so being able to play around in those drafts is important.
Well, and I think you bring up a really good point of process versus product. When you are
Mm,
focused on what will be the end product, it really cheapens and kind of puts so much pressure on the process part that I feel like you don't get to figure out who your characters are, what they want, what they need, what they're fighting for, etc., because you're so focused on the end goal. And that is not to say that I don't think that you can think about how commercial is this work. I think that there, for working writers, the reality is that we have to think about, is this book going to sell? Like, I don't have this point in my career, I don't really have the luxury of sitting with projects the way that I used to. And so you do have to decide, which project do I devote time to? But hopefully you're devoting time to it in a way that you can sink into that process a little bit and not be completely undone by the fact that this is going to be a book. Like with my second book, I know it's coming out and I know what it's got to be. So I do have to think about that. But for those of you who have the luxury of starting writing, seeing if it's something you want to do, figuring out if it's the path that you want to follow, let that first book teach you if you even like this. Because it's going to get to a point where you're going to be sitting there being just frustrated that it's not doing what you want it to do. And how do you figure out your way out of it? And if you don't like it, that's going to be miserable.
yeah. You have to love it, even the
Yeah.
down hard moments. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I feel like this week I had a moment with my book where it was not doing what I needed it to do. But then it's like it's a puzzle, you gotta kind of know when to step away, but then know when to like roll your sleeves up and you're like, okay, I'm gonna get in here, we're gonna fix it, we'll figure out where it's not working. So You
Yeah.
definitely have to love the process.
Yeah, and it's not an easy process, and there's the writing process, which is not easy, and then there's the publishing process, which is also not easy
Whole other
and
thing.
adds its own challenges and obstacles. And especially if you are a marginalized author, take
Mhm.
that and multiply it by 10. And so you have to figure out something that's going to keep you pushing, because there's
Mhm.
so much rejection and failure for even the most successful authors.
So what keeps you pushing?
I will say it's because I just got a memory that said 10 years ago, I posted that I had just signed with my first literary agent. And in the post, I'm like, this is the beginning of my journey, and I can't wait for I thought, give me maybe 3 months and I'd be posting, here's the publishing announcement. And fast forward to now, I am about 3 weeks out from my debut novel coming out, which thank you, thank you.
So excited.
But that's 10 years. And I had someone respond when I posted about it now, say, did you not want to change that if you could to, maybe indie publish or self-publish or something? Because 10 years is a long time to go without seeing that success. But I think that for me, my journey has been very different. And so for me, I signed with that first agent 10 years ago with a young adult novel. And we did a lot of revision on that, and we went out on submission to editors. And while it was on submission, I did what everybody tells you to do, which is write the next book. And I said, yes, I'm a good student. I'll go write the next book. And I loved that second book. And I like to call it Sunflower. And I put everything into Sunflower. I still think it's one of the best things I've ever written. It was inspired by one of my favorite movies. The voice of the character, I just loved being with her. It had romance. It just felt magical. It felt like everything that I wanted to do in a book. So as attached as I was to that first book, that second book, I was like, you know what? If that one doesn't sell, this is it. This is it. And that other book, we got some revise and resubmit notes for it. And so I went and I revised and I resubmitted. And the editor said, I think I'm making the book worse. Which
Oh no.
I was like, okay, I didn't know that was an option, but great, good to know. So, I think we kept with it for a little bit, but I kind of was just really focused on this second book. And I told my agent, I was like, I'm almost done with this. I'm really excited about it. And I'll send it to you soon. But I had recently gotten married and we were going on our honeymoon. And so I was like, I'll send it after that. But I had finished the book before we went on the honeymoon. So we went on our honeymoon, and then two things happened in fairly quick succession. My agent left the business, and my mom died suddenly while we were on our honeymoon. And so when I came back, I was just this little shell of grief. And I was 27, so I was a baby in a lot of ways, and I suddenly had to grow up, and I had to figure out if I could keep writing, because it felt, if you haven't gone through that kind of grief, it really does feel like an explosion inside of you. Like everything that you thought you knew about the world just gets completely upended. And so I was sitting there trying to pick up those pieces of myself. And I was like, I don't know if I have the energy or even the ability to jump back in the query trenches. But I knew my mom would have been like, I did not pay for a creative writing degree for you to opt out. No, get back. So, and I had Sunflower. So I was like, you know what? Let me jump back in. Let me try. And so I went back in the query trenches. And this time I got multiple offers of representation. And the agent that I ended up signing with is my agent to this day. And I adore her. And she loved Sunflower. She was like, this is great. And, we did some revising, and then we went out, and it was a very different experience than the first time, because we got some Big Five editor interest pretty early. And that editor even went on Twitter and was like, oh my God, when you read the book that you've been waiting for. And I knew, because of when things came in, that it was mine. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, this is it. This is it. Again, I had my moment of like, it's happening now. And she took it to the editorial team. They really loved it. But then she took it to the final stage, the final boss, if you will, finance and marketing. And they said no. And I was crushed, because I was like, here's somebody who really loved this, who really, it felt like understood the story. And from there, I was like, okay, now I am grief shell. The work that I think is the best thing I've ever written is gone and that dream is dead, which nothing is ever dead in publishing.
Yeah.
It remains in a drawer and I hope one day will be seen. But then I was like, okay, now I have to write. I have to, again, I could feel my mom being like, okay, move it along. Again, I didn't pay for that creative writing degree for you to throw in the towel. So I wrote again. And I wrote a book that was inspired by when I worked at a theme park. And it was this very weird, kind of gnarled, wild thing. And it had 3 points of view and it was unwieldy. And it had one of the characters, her mom had died. Shocker. I was doing a bit of a self-insert there and working through my grief on the page. And then when I finished it, it was not ready to be a thing. It was just a strange manuscript. Both my agent and I were like, not the time. So I set it aside and I wrote more books and I kept writing more books and we kept hitting walls. And that's when I started ghostwriting because I told my agent, I was like, look, I just want to write. If it's not happening for me as me, I don't care. Whatever you can get. And so she got this little ghostwriting job that I auditioned for, and it was just a chapter, but I got that. And then from there, it just became more jobs. And I was writing not just chapters, but entire books for New York Times bestselling authors and celebrities. And then it was very strange because those books were on billboards and talk shows and being celebrated. And I would scroll through my feed and I would see those books. And I was like, oh, so it's not my writing, it's me, which is a strange feeling. But at the same time, I was gaining these skills and writing in all these genres. And I went back to my agent and I said, that weird thriller book that I wrote back in 2017, I think I could revise it. And I think now might be the moment. And she was like, okay. And so I did, revised it a lot. And one of my friends is a professor of editing, and they had asked me for a manuscript that they could kind of test on their editing students. And they asked me, do you have any books that you've shelved? And I said, yes, many, but let me throw you this one. And their students really connected to it and had good things to say about it. So that also gave me a bit of a boost. So we edited it. And then I had one editor, my dream editor that I wanted to go out to, and she bought it. And so to go back to your original question, because I have not forgotten it, how do you keep powering through? I just had to believe that sometime it would be my time. And that was easier at certain moments than others. At those moments where I was like, this is it. Obviously, that was great because I thought success is just around the corner. But also, I didn't see a journey that ended with me not doing this. I felt like I'd been trying for too long. And the idea of if I gave up and, it was just the next book that would have sold, I couldn't really live with that.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that is a journey to publication. But I think it not only is a good lesson, like you're saying, for newer writers out there who are listening, and dedication, like you said, you do need something to push you forward because I don't think everyone could have pushed forward through that. So I am happy that you have because I'm so excited to read Difficult Girls. But it feels like even just the ghostwriting journey, like you said, I mean, having to write in so many different genres and writing other people's vision and like making it come to life, I feel like amazing master classes and like how to write a book. So I feel like that process must have been, I don't know, still amazing and fun in its own way. But I'm so glad that you're able to have your moment with your name on the front cover. That is just so exciting.
I mean, it means a lot. It's hard to really articulate, especially because this is a journey that started when my mom was alive and she's not here to see this moment. And she wasn't here for any of my ghostwriting or any of that. And so the book is dedicated to her. And there's just a lot of gratitude that I have in my heart for her and everyone else in my life that kind of supported me up to this moment. And, like I have had a day job the entire time. I am a teacher and it is not an easy day job.
No, it is
But
not one of the hardest historically.
Yes, but I also have been very, very lucky. I have, my husband who has been incredibly supportive of my journey and who has had to babysit my ADHD ass in a lot of ways and been like, so are we gonna start on that deadline anytime soon? And like will literally sit next to me so that I get going, or we'll cook dinner so that I can keep working 4 hours straight on a deadline. And just having support is no small piece of the process.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. That's beautiful. I love that you dedicated the book to your mom. I know that she would be really proud. That's really awesome. I'm gonna get
Thank you.
emotional.
I joked, and this will be a dark humor joke, so if you do not like dark humor, you could
No, I love it.
skip forward. But when I first wrote the dedication, I like ran it by my husband. I said, okay, so I've got, to my mom, thank you for teaching me the power of being a difficult girl. I maintain that dying was a overly dramatic way of getting out of reading the book. And my husband was like, maybe for the first book, we just keep it sweet. Maybe for the first one. And I like joked back. I was like, well, if she wanted an opinion, like, she could be here. Dark humor, this is the way. I feel like if you've dealt with something like this, or at least this is my coping strategy, but I feel like there was no one else that I would have dedicated the book to, because she was very invested in this. Even if she didn't understand all of it, she was very invested in what I was doing.
That's great. And I feel like you were saying, like not only support from your husband, but from your family to help you pursue this. And just, it's so important in a job, a passion, an art form that does have a lot of roadblocks up against the way, like to have the support system cheering you on when you can't cheer on yourself. So that's great that, you've had your mom cheering you on the whole time and your husband, and I'm sure other people around you. And I just think it's really important with writing.
You definitely need, because I know not everyone is, it is privilege and it is a luck to have the community that I've had and the support system that I've had. But even if you don't have that immediately, I think it's so important for writers to find some kind of community, because I also would not be here without my writing friends, my critique group, the other debut authors in 2025. I've made so many close writing friends. I will go on, writing dates with friends, and we'll do what I love. Our little system is, usually I'm doing this with author Ivy Marie. Hi, Isa. Yeah. I'm so grateful. We're in the same debut month. We're at the same publisher, and it has been a lifeline to have someone else who's going through it. But we love to go and write especially when we're both on deadline, and we'll do 25-minute writing and then 5-minute yap breaks, which sometimes we cheat on, and they're a little longer. But just the idea that when we're there and we're writing together, I'm like, well, I can't scroll social media. Like, she's right here. She's sitting in front of me. And if she's like, I have 5,000 words, and I'm like, I wrote 10. I can't do that. I can't. So I think that has been essential. So finding your community. And I do think you need both. You need that support system if you're lucky enough to have it with family, friends, et cetera, whoever it might be, non-publishing people. And then you need the writing community. And I do think it's helpful to have both, because the non-publishing people are there to be like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean that's how publishing works? And like my father-in-law, who's like, you should just call up Oprah and see if she can fit you in for an interview. And I don't know what that meme or quote is, that's like, you should just call Taylor. That's almost verbatim was his strategy. But honestly, that helps humanize it a bit, because I'm like, oh yeah, no one understands how hard this is except other writers.
Yes. No, I love that. Yes. I feel like writing community is so important and hard to get. But I always say, like, don't be afraid to, I just feel like, hop into people's Instagram DMs. I feel like every writer I've talked to is so lovely and like willing to talk writing and just talk about their projects. And then, as you build that relationship, I think it's so nice to have other writers have like eyes on your project or hold you accountable. Like just before this, I was also on a FaceTime with some writing friends, and we were all writing together because we were staring at each other, and you can't not write. Yep. So I do think it is really nice to have all of those things. That's great.
Well, and I think when you form those relationships too, it has to be a give and take, because I will say that I think any writer can attest to the folks who jump in the DMs who just want something. Like, they want you to read something. They want you to do something for them. And this is not to discourage people from jumping in and asking questions. I love when people jump in my DMs and ask questions, but I have had people be like, hi, I see you're a writer. Read this. And I do think that you have to be thoughtful of the way that you enter a community space, and that I think there should be a lot of listening right out of the gate. And a lot of seeing what you can gather from the resources that already exist and then kind of building from there.
Yeah, that's a really great point. That I feel like a lot, I mean, community is a relationships. I've definitely
Yeah.
learned that like you are going to be pouring into them the same way you would friends in real life and really like water those seeds and actually form like a really beautiful community. So yeah, it is a relationship and like looking at it as a relationship. I love that advice.
Yeah, and when you're in a critique group, you can also always tell the people who are just waiting for their turn and they don't say anything about anybody else's work. They just wait for
Yeah.
their turn and then they kind of suck up the advice like a vacuum and nothing gets back to the other people. And that's just not good for your own writing because you learn a
Right?
lot by the critiques of other people. And sometimes you'll see things that they're doing so easily that then when you go back and you leave the critique group, you're like, I am
Mhm.
also doing that.
Yeah, and like reading, like you said, maybe because we both did creative writing as major, now you're an English teacher, but
Hmm.
reading other people's work, I feel like is essential to
Hmm.
writing and
Hmm.
understanding how story is structured and how people deviate from the rules and when it works and when it doesn't. And yeah, so pivotal to what we're doing here. So you said difficult girls was this weird thing at the beginning, kind of gnarly, a ball of grief.
Hmm.
And it seems like it has a lot of you in it. Like it's set at a theme park where
Yeah.
had a job. It seems like it's set kind of in San Diego. It's dealing with things that you may have dealt with. How did you ball up all these real life experiences and get a thriller? I love that. Are you always drawn to thrillers?
Well, I will say, thankfully, there was no murder at the theme park that I worked at.
That is good.
I feel that's important to put on the
That is
record.
good.
But I will say, in Difficult Girls, so at the theme park that I worked, it was an incredible space. I was a weirdo, and I remain a weirdo proudly. I feel that's most authors that you meet are going to fall into that category. But I was very intense and I had a lot of feelings and I remember turning 16 and being like I'm going to get a job and I'm going to enter the workforce and things are going to change, which if you've read Difficult Girls, Greta also, my protagonist, she has an incident happen at school that leads her to be like I need to reinvent myself and she's like I'm going to enter the workforce. That's it. And that will be the answer to my problems. And a lot of that did come exactly from me, though I did not have the traumatic incident that Greta does. But I did find when I got to the theme park that having a job was a completely different experience from school because there were a few people that I knew from school that worked at the park and one who worked in the department. They were the one that helped me get the job. But for the most part, it was all new people and it was teens, it was adults, it was this weird mishmash because I was specifically in the entertainment department of just different people. And I loved these people. I was so inspired and so intrigued and just, I really felt like I found people who understood me. And those relationships, many of them lasted a long time and continue to this day. Person who officiated my wedding was someone I worked with at the theme park. And so it was a very tight knit group. And it was very much, it felt to me like found family and just people who understood me and got me at a molecular level. And also, there was just this interesting dynamic between performers and technicians and ushers, which I started out as an usher, and face characters and all of this. And I transitioned. I was an usher and then also a princess face character and a witch, which best job. I mean, literally as a princess, I would walk out and, greet people for 25, 30 minutes in my throne and then go back to the green room and read for hours until I did it again. So, as much as I love writing and teaching, ease of job, that was pretty unmatched. But so while there was all this good stuff and things that truly I just woke up every day so excited to be part of this job, even though it was just a theme park job, it was so invigorating. There was also a darkness to it. And I remember as a princess sitting in the throne and having these kids taking pictures with me, and then their uncles or their dads or whatever saying comments to me like, oh, is there room in your lap for
Mm.
me? And things like that, where I was powerless to do anything because they knew I was trapped in that throne. They knew I had to just keep smiling. I couldn't do anything. We didn't have character attendance. I know it at other parks, they have those. I did not have a character attendant, so it was just me. And that feeling of my inability to do anything about this mistreatment. And I would see other parts of the park, that kind of underbelly, something underneath all the glitz and the glamour, that there were bad things happening under the surface, and particularly in the entertainment department. And I'm sure there were other things happening in other departments, but I wasn't in those departments. And at the same time, there were things like the Harvey Weinstein allegations were coming out for the first time. And I really started looking at, there was the entertainment industry and then there was the entertainment world at the theme park and how they were kind of connected. And I said, this could be a really rich place to look at both the good and the bad of a theme park and entertainment and that world in general. And it seemed like a natural place for a thriller. And I also really wanted to get at this idea of young women and how powerless they felt and what would happen if they started to push back against those systems that made them feel powerless.
That's amazing. And now I'm even more excited to be picking up your book when it comes out in a few short weeks. So when you're going into a story, and a story as complex as Difficult Girls, are you having all of these thoughts in the beginning? Like, are you sitting down and you're like, okay, this is exactly kind of the thematic sense I want to get across with this book and what I want to explore? Or is that coming out as you're writing and you're realizing the connections then?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think when I first wrote Greta, I knew that she was going to be a lot. I knew that she was going to be intense. I knew that she was going to be dealing with this sense of being out of place at school and wanting to find somewhere where she felt she could have a soft landing, and just that desperation to find that place. So I think I knew there were going to be aspects of found family kind of right as I was writing it, because I wanted to give her that. But I also didn't want it to be too easy. I wanted her to struggle. I think the other writing advice I'm always telling my students is, whatever you think your character, the worst thing that could happen to them, scratch that and make it worse. And poor Greta. Yeah, I did that a lot. But a lot of those pieces, though, had to click in during revision. This book went through so many revisions. It started as 3 points of view first, and then it became just one. And that was a lot. That was cutting about 40 to 50,000 words and then writing 40 to 50,000 new words. And that was an adventure, but a necessary one to go through. I think that a lot of those themes, I knew them, but they surprised me with subplots that would happen. Like when you read Difficult Girls, we find out pretty early on, so this is like a minor spoiler, but not really. But you find out pretty early that 20 years before the park opened, that a performer was brutally killed in something that culminated with her being dead in a gondola. If you've ever been to a theme park, they kind of look like ski lifts. They take you from one part of the park to the other, but her body is discovered in this gondola, and it's discovered the next day after it's a soft opening of the park. And the person who discovers it the next day is the janitor. He feels what he thinks is a drip of water or rain on his cheek, and he looks up and it's blood. And that whole backstory of another girl dying 20 years before was added at the revision stage. And that is so thematically tied to the book that when it came to me, I was like, how has this not been there the whole time? Yeah. I don't understand. And especially with power dynamics and what has happened to this girl and how it's reverberated through the park, all of that felt so integral that I still honestly can't believe that it wasn't on the page before. I think that's where I enjoy seeing how a story kind of tells you, oh, you missed this.
Yes.
Add me in, please.
I always love asking about theme because it seems to be different for every author. Like, do you sit down and you're like, okay, I know exactly what kind of book I want to say and what I want it to say? And then I've heard some people say like they don't even know what it's telling them until it's completely finished. So I always find it really interesting to see where people are at. That's great that you kind of have both. Like you're on both ends of the spectrum. I know what I want to say, and then it just gets richer as you go through the process, which I think is really great.
Yeah, I think I usually have a really clear vision of who I'm telling the story about and kind of what I want them to learn, but I also try to remain really open to what the story kind of suggests.
So do you feel like character comes first for you then?
They usually show up unannounced and uninvited often, but I write some pretty, I'll use a word that I don't believe, but other people have used. I write some unlikable girls, and I write some hard to like prickly, in some instances. I wouldn't call Greta prickly, but just some girls who there's a lot to them and they're not for everyone. And that was also a hard lesson for me to learn, that I was a lot for some people, but that didn't mean I needed to change. I just needed to find the people that I was for. And I like writing those girls. I like writing, you know, girls who just are unafraid and want a lot. Greta wants so much. She wants this job. She wants to be successful. She wants the boys, and she is unapologetic about the fact that she wants these boys. The opening line of the book is, "Tonight I'm going to make out with Gray Larson." Like, Greta is not.
She knows what she wants.
She does.
Yeah.
She is clueless about how to get these things, but she knows that she wants them. And I see that in so many young women. I saw it in myself. I saw it in my friends. I despise the way that culture tries to tell those girls to want less and to mute themselves in some way. And especially, I wrote Greta before I knew that I had ADHD, and I've had some readers suggest that perhaps Greta has ADHD. She may well have it. If anything, in my heart, I think that she might have undiagnosed ADHD. But I think that this idea of these girls who just kind of are a lot is exciting to write about. And so they do show up and they have very clear voices and they're like, "Hello, you're going to write my story." And I do.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, personally, I love stories with complex, difficult, unlikable women. And I do like when authors can execute this so well, where they are unlikable, but you're still rooting for them because you care about them. They might do things that you don't like. I guess that's where the unlikable comes from. They might make the choices you don't think they should be making, but you understand why they're doing it. And you're rooting for them regardless.
Well, and I think to your point, I think often they're making the choices that you would make, but you're ashamed of.
That's a really great point.
Like, I think that Greta makes some awful choices in this book. And I think they make some people really uncomfortable. Especially, and I think anyone writing young adult can relate to this in a way. A lot of people reading young adult don't want teens to be teens. And as someone who teaches them all day long and watches them make terrible mistakes all class period, and I teach wonderful, amazing students, but they're still teenagers. Like, you'll see the moment when a teen is like, "I'm going to throw this thing across the room." And like, you can see it. You're like, "Why are we doing this? You know, this is not the move." And they know it's not. When they look at the paper and then they look across the room and they're just like, "I can't." And they throw it. And I love actually showing those moments in books. But I think a lot of people want to say like, "Oh, no, 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 no. I would never." And I'm like, you sure about that? You're sure? And so I think it's more satisfying as a writer and as a reader to see people make those decisions. Like, yeah, make that bad decision. I want to see how it plays out.
Now I'm even more excited to dive into your character. But with all these difficult girls, with all the complex characters making bad decisions, what does your character process look like? Are you very much a person where you're like, I have to understand them fully before I write, or do you do that in the writing?
I think I mostly do that in the writing. I am not a print out a character questionnaire and figure out their zodiac sign or their favorite meal or anything like that. I'll do that maybe in writing exercises and writing journals, but usually I can kind of pick it up. Like, it feels like a language for each character. Like, oh, this character would like this. And like, I feel pretty confident that Greta, now that I've written her, would be a Cancer, but I didn't know that I didn't have that explicitly spelled out when I was writing her.
I'm so glad you said that. I feel validated. I'm very much a like get to know my characters as I'm writing them. Like, they kind of have to speak to me on the page. So I always like to see where people are at with their character creation. Do you have a favorite character that you've written outside of Greta in this book?
Ivy.
Love.
So when you meet her, she's I love her. I would, if there's a character that I could get like a cup of coffee with and hang out with for a day, it would be her. She's awesome.
That's
she's
amazing.
Great.
Is there a character that was the most challenging to write?
Mercy. And Mercy is challenging because she is unlikable in different ways than Greta is. And I can't really say much about why she's unlikable because it's kind of all a spoiler.
Yeah.
But she is what I wanted to explore with this book really is how people are difficult in different ways. And they don't like just because you're okay with one person's. I think a lot of us, especially with young women and folks of marginalized genders, I think we have this idea that there's going to be one shade of what makes them challenging to deal with. But the reality is that everyone pushes us in different ways. That is a bit of a spectrum.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I won't push too much for spoilers. Fine.
I realize I'm being very cryptic. I'm not
I
trying
know.
to, but
No, I love
talking
it.
about a thriller mystery is really hard because
Hard.
people be like, "What was your favorite part to write?" And I'm like,
I can't tell you.
"You'll know when you get there."
Yes. So with thrillers, mysteries, it's one of my favorite genres to read. I'm an voracious reader in this genre. I could never write it because I feel like you have to be a genius. Like, how do you plot out pacing in a thriller? Like, when to know when to ramp it up and like drop all the hints and unravel the mystery? Like, how do you plot that out?
So for me, I this started as a 3 POV story. And so I love a color-coded index card. So I had, one color for each person. And it looked a little bit like that. I think it's the Charlie meme where he's like this and he's got all the strings. That's what I feel like my living room looks like when I'm drafting or outlining a thriller, I should say, is I have all their chapters. But I will say that this book went through so much revision that a lot of that had to change. And so then I would finish a draft and I would have to go back and I would outline what I had. And then I would move those pieces around and figure out like, okay, what can I change? What can I move? And, in this book that I'm writing right now, my second book, the first draft was 2 POVs. And now this second draft is 7 POVs. And so I feel like thrillers for me, maybe there are others who don't have this experience, but I feel like a lot of thrillers have to be kind of teased out in the revising state.
Because then you can like see the gaps. Like, when, yeah, that makes sense instead of right up front. So, what took it from 3 POVs to one? Was that like a group decision with like the editing team?
Well, so
Or
God
if you
bless
can
my
talk about it or
No,
not.
I can.
Okay, great.
God bless my editor. I love her so much and she is so brilliant. But when she came to me and she was like, Veronica, you are using, because it was Greta and Mercy and the killer's point of view. And it was a
Oh.
mysterious killer. You didn't know who it was, like the name was blacked out, etc. And I thought that was brilliant. I was like,
Actually,
look at me.
I was about to say that's so cool.
I was like,
love that.
what a hook. This is amazing. And I really thought that was my hook. That was what made the book special. I was so into it. And she was like, Veronica, you do not need those other 2 POVs. You are using them as a crutch. You want this book to be from Greta's point of view. She is your hook. And I was like, but she's a lot. Like, do we really want to like put all of our story eggs in Greta's basket? And I was kind of scared. As much as I loved her, I was scared to let it be her story. And I was like, no. No, I'm going to revise this book and I'm going to put all these pieces in so that those characters, their POVs need to exist. They need to be there. And she was like, okay, but try this. Write it so that it's Greta's point of view all the way through. Like, you only write this version from her POV. And then afterwards you add those other ones in. So they're more like additional flavor rather than kind of the whole book. And like, you try your best to kind of let Greta's story stand on its own because that will be what makes it work better. And I was like, fine. So I do that. I was so mad. I was like, she's so wrong. Wrote the book. And then I got all the way to the end and I went to add those POVs back. And I was like, she's right. And I was even more mad than I had been before. I was furious that she was so right. And I read it again and I was like, oh my God, it's better. And so I went back and I made it so that it really was just her book, no other POVs. And again, the book is so much better for it. And she was absolutely right. And I do think there is a time and a place for, I think, sticking up for things in the book that you're like, no, I feel passionately that this is what it's supposed to be. But in this instance, when I really sat with it and I looked at it, I felt in my heart of hearts that she was right. And she also encouraged me to trust and believe that this was Greta's story and she deserved to tell it start to finish. But yeah, it was hard.
I mean, that's a big change in terms of the writing work, but also it feels like the vulnerability side too. Like, if Greta is this, big, unapologetic girl, which we love. I'm sure it was easier to maybe hide behind other people instead of let Greta have the spotlight, but she was screaming. She was ready to come out. I love
She
that.
was. She was. And, and I do think writers have to be willing to kind of complex characters. There are going to be people who don't like them, and that's okay.
Yeah.
There have been folks who, have read it and been like, yeah, Greta's not for me. I didn't love being in her head. But then there are other people who have read it and said, oh my God, I felt so seen.
Wow.
And that's why I do it. We're never going to write books that are for everyone. That book does not exist. There are books that I have adored that are my literal favorite books. And I could go over to Goodreads right now and there would be a 1-star review that's like,
Yeah.
annoying main character. And to them, fine, but that is not my experience. And so the more that you twist yourself into a pretzel to make other people comfortable with your book, I feel like the more readers you're actually losing.
Yeah, I really love that advice, especially for newer writers who might be trying to get it perfect, because it can feel like a lot of pressure, like you said in the beginning, people focusing on the end product, the pressure to appease a ton of people. But it seems like the best stories come from that vulnerable place, and it comes from what you as an author really want to write about, something that you would enjoy to read. And that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, wow, I know we're already at
I
so
warned
sorry.
you.
That's why I warned you too. I was like, just so you know, for some reason, I get chatty. We get chatty. It
I love to yap.
happens. Me too. It's a problem. That's why I also have to have writing dates with people, because I need to stop myself from yapping and start actually writing. I mean, this book has definitely gone through a way different process, right? You wrote a draft, you kind of boxed it up, and then you unearthed it. But in general, the age old question, do you feel like you're a pantser or a plotter? And where are you on the spectrum that writers always give?
Very much a plotter, but I feel like sometimes plotters get not a bad name, but I feel like people don't, for me, I feel like people don't recognize how much an outline allows me to be spontaneous. Like, I feel like when I say that, I sound like the mom at the theme park being like, we're going to have a fun day and we're going to do all of these activities and we will not deviate from the program. And it will be structured fun. But I will say that when I have the outline, that's when I feel like the characters can kind of start to act up, be who they are, do things within the context of those scenes. And if a scene really doesn't work, I throw it out. But to have a general guideline of where we're going is really helpful to me. Also, because usually I'm writing on deadlines, I have to write fast. And so if I don't have an outline and I'm just kind of figuring things out as we go, it doesn't work for me in my brain. But hats off to all of the pantsers out there.
I can't do it. I just tried to pants act 1 of the book I'm currently writing, and I stopped. I was like, no, we're going back. I have to understand. Like you said, like the guideposts, like you kind of need to see the path between the trees a little bit.
Well, and I do have, like I mentioned, I have that exploratory phase where I'm just kind of almost writing in their voice and trying to figure out who they are. And that to me feels a little pantsy, but I do think that once I have those components of initial voice, because I'm usually writing in first person, so that voice and then the roadmap, things just flow.
So in that discovery phase, are you writing scenes that you envision for the book, or is it just anything that you can write to explore how the characters kind of move around the world?
Sometimes, usually, it's a line, and that line is their voice, and then the scene kind of goes from there. But it really varies. And sometimes those scenes make it into the book. I'm trying to think for Difficult Girls. I think a slightly cannibalized version of it made it into the final book, I believe. But usually those do end up as scenes, usually. Not always, but
Yeah.
usually.
I love that you said cannibalized version, because that is so true. I'm just kind of picking it to pieces and throwing some in the book and throwing some elsewhere.
Well, and that's why never, ever, ever delete anything that
Yes.
you've written for a book. I mean, this Difficult Girls has started so many different ways and been written so many different ways, but I believe one of the early versions of it started at the party and then it was changed and then it came back to the party because I was like, this is where we need to be. So I'm so glad that I didn't throw out all of my descriptions because that would have been a waste of time.
Yeah. That's also just so, I don't know, it's nice to hear because I do feel like, especially younger me, who was even going into creative writing, like I truly thought all my favorite books that I picked up were like maybe the second draft, most likely the first.
Mm.
And it was just like this polished, finished product, and everyone was just so amazing at it the first tries. It's always so encouraging to hear amazing writers like yourself who go like the story is a living, breathing, changing thing through
Yeah.
revisions. And you really are kind of carving the stone away to get the statue at the end. And it's just a nice reminder that, our first drafts don't have to be perfect, nor does our second draft. It just needs to do the job to get us to the next point, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I completely agree.
One question I really wanted to ask is obviously it's a lot about these difficult girls and all these amazing complex things, but what emotions or conversations do you hope your readers are going to come away with after reading Difficult Girls?
I hope that there are conversations around power dynamics. I hope that there are conversations around, this is really hard given the spoiler. But so one thing that was important to me is I did want to write a fun murder mystery, but I also wanted it to be that there was a bit of a realization that when we're talking about, things get sensationalized. So in the book, Haley, who is the character who died 20 years before, when people are talking about Haley, she feels just like a character to the characters.
Yeah.
They're like, she's just kind of this person that existed in stories and she's not real. And I wanted Greta to really come to this understanding that that's a real person who died and had a life ahead of her and what happened when that life was cut short. So I wanted to balance, there's a lot of dark humor in the book and there's a lot of fun to be had with the murder mystery, but I also wanted to have those pauses of like, oh, this is a real person and the devastating reality of that. So I want people to be able to talk about both, but I also want people to have had a good time. Like there's a romance in the book that I love. And it was especially important to me that there be, somebody who loves this super intense, all over the place girl. And I had a lot of fun writing it. So I hope people talk about that too.
Yes, yes. Do you have, I mean, you've given amazing advice that I'm over here like, remember this. And I'm the one who gets to listen back to it and edit it. So I'm definitely be writing all this down. But do you have any advice for newer writers or writers looking to traditionally publish?
Get friendly with failure and don't be afraid of that word. I think there are so many people in the writing community, and I don't think this is wrong, but I do think there's kind of this prevalent advice or perspective that it's not failure, it's just putting something away for now, or, it's not failure, it's just not yet. And for me, that always felt like people trying to make me feel better. And I preferred to say, no, this is a failure, at least for now. Like I failed to sell this book. I failed to get an agent or whatever was that moment that I had not achieved what I wanted to achieve. And therefore I had to keep going. And I think if I had said like, oh, it's just for now, or like I needed to feel that feeling deeply. And that, became my motivator. And spite's a powerful thing. I got a long list of people who did not believe I could get here. And maybe it's not the most emotionally healthy thing and I can dissect it in therapy, but that kept me going.
That's what we pay our therapists for. So that's
Exactly.
okay. And what has been the biggest lesson you've learned in your debut year?
Rely on friends and use them for gut checks often. There are so many times I've had to call Issa and I've just been like a sobbing, curled up ball of a human and just been like, I'm a terrible writer. I'm never gonna. And she's been like, you're fine. Much nicer, but has helped me pick myself up off the floor. And I am immensely grateful for that. And I would say too, if you are, because there's not a ton of advice out there for debut authors, if you are a debut author, please get friendly with other writers and bookstores. And I think some debuts kind of expect community to come to them. And again, this is much easier said than done, especially as a writer living in Los Angeles. But I went to so many book events this year and it was so great because, and I had been doing that before I was a debut too, but I definitely ramped it it up this year, going to people's author events, talking to bookstore owners, becoming friendly with the people in the bookstores, getting their recommendations. And not because I wanted something, but because I wanted to be part of the community and I wanted to see, what it was like. I do think I've seen some authors be disappointed that other authors or other bookstores haven't shown up for them. And my question has kind of been, well, did you show up for them?
Yeah.
And like, did you see this as a transaction? And if so, that can be deeply felt by the person on the other side.
Yeah. Really great advice. Really great advice. Now I'm like, what do I title this podcast? Veronica Bane has all the best advice.
Well, and I will say though, to that, I will say that there are definitely prepare yourself for a little bit of heartbreak and recognize that there are systemic issues in publishing that make it harder for some people. It has been heartbreaking to watch the challenges that marginalized authors in the debut group have dealt with that are out of their control and that are not their fault. And I think having people to gut check that with and to realize that you can do all the things and sometimes the cards just are not stacked for you and that's not on you.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, now that we've talked for way over an hour, I just have a couple rapid fire questions.
Yay!
Then I can give you your afternoon back. What is a piece of art that has had a profound impact on you?
Jurassic Park is
Love the answer.
My favorite movie. And if you want to watch a movie that is a masterclass in character, tension, suspense, all of the above, it is phenomenal. And if you want to talk about a movie where I feel like people misunderstand the theme, they literally say it. They say they're not monsters, Tim, they're animals. They say it for you. And yet people still want to misunderstand them. And I will say, I'm sorry to those of you who enjoy the new films, but I haven't seen the new one yet. But the Jurassic World movies, I feel fundamentally misunderstand that theme. And that frustrates me. But so when I say Jurassic Park, I mean the first one, and it is a masterpiece.
I love that. One of my close writing friends, hi Becca, that's also her favorite movie. And I've been meaning to rewatch it because she keeps talking about it. And now you've mentioned it. So I will have to watch that this weekend.
I watch it a minimum of 1 to 2 times a year. So
I love that. And then let's see. Oh, what's something totally unrelated to writing that you're obsessed with right now?
You asked me these questions in advance too, and
It's okay.
my brain said, no, we are gonna. I will say, so I just finished the school year. This was my first week of summer. And if you are a teacher, you know that this is the week where it's like your brain does a factory reset where it's just clearing out everything and not really allowing anything to exist. But I will say I love movies. And so technically that's kind of related to writing, but I'm really excited to just go watch a bunch of movies this week. So
there's some good ones coming out.
Yes, I will not be seeing 28 Years Later. That is not on my list because that looks terrifying. But there are a lot of other ones that are out that I'm excited to see.
I can't do horror movies, but I love horror books.
See, if I'm going to see a horror movie, I have to read, and this, I know some people are going to be upset about this, but I have to read the entire summary before I will go see it.
No, that's fair. I think we should be able to know what we're getting ourselves into.
Yeah. And especially if a dog is going to die.
Yes.
Or a horse, I need to know that. I need to know that information up front.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm a little bit more understanding of it in books. It's books I'm a little bit, and I understand people who need content warnings, but for me personally, when I'm reading, I'm generally okay with most things on the page. I don't need to know in advance.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. In movies, it's different. Book, fair game. Since I love reality TV, unfortunately, that's like one of my worst traits. What reality show would you totally crush?
I don't know if I would be good at any reality show, to be honest, because I would like to think, and this is going to be a real throwback, but I don't know if they still do, but they used to do the Real World versus Road Rules challenges, and I loved those. I loved those growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like to think I'd be good. Like I like to think I would crush those. I would be awful. Absolutely awful. Also would love to think I'd be great at like Legends of the Hidden Temple, like the kids reality competition.
Absolutely.
I love to think I would be great. I would be awful. Yeah. Awful. But in my head, I'm like, bring it on. I'm ready.
I feel like I would also be great at Legends of the Hidden Temple, but I know I would never make it past those stepping stones over water.
Which, how do you go on with life after that?
And
After
then you're that
everyone's
first
watched you?
team. You're the gray monkeys that didn't get across as the
Yes.
silver
Yes.
monkeys that they
No.
were. And then you're like, great. Okay. That's embarrassing.
No. I couldn't. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I've actually been on a few reality shows in the background. At the theme park where I worked, one of the contestants of The Bachelor brought his date to the theme park that I worked at. And I was a princess in the background. And you see me just kind of like waiting by the table with my face paint and my crown and everything.
That's so
And
funny.
I'm just hanging out, but it's so fast and they built it up. They were like, we're featured on the reality show. And it's like, you see me for 2 seconds, but I was there.
You were there. That's so funny. And I love that you said Real World Road Rules Challenge because I just had to explain this to my husband literally this week that yes, the show The Challenge, because it's still going on. I still watch
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
It's still going on with like half of the same cast from Real World Road Rules, The
Oh my
Challenge. And I had
gosh.
to explain to him that that used to be the title. It used to
Yeah.
literally be that long. And he did not believe me. Yeah, so I love that. Not a throwback for me. One of my favorites.
I loved watching those. And I didn't watch, it was very interesting because I did not watch The Real World or Road Rules. I did not. So I had no context for who these people were or why they were fighting all the time,
Oh,
but I enjoyed the challenge.
yes.
So
Yes. I love that. Okay, and then I think very apt for your title, Difficult Girls. What would your warning label say?
oh God, on the book or on me?
On you.
Like on me as a human?
Yeah.
We'll sing off key, we'll be loud.
Yes.
We'll
Love that.
we'll get distracted and wander away. My poor husband, we will be out and he will look around and he'll be like,
Where'd
did
you
you
go?
go? And I'll just be, living my best life, wandering. Yeah, we'll wander. I think the wander would be key.
Okay.
So
It's important to note for
yeah,
people. Yes.
she's a wanderer. She's a runner.
Yeah, she's a runner. You gotta watch out for her. So now that we wrap up, because I've taken up a lot of your time.
Oh no, this has been an absolute
Good.
privilege and a joy.
I'm glad. Where can listeners connect with you and find your work?
I am on all of the social medias at Veronica Bane, though I will say I'm most active on Instagram, Threads, and attempting TikTok. And then my website, www.veronicabane.com. And I am going on tour this summer. So please check the events so that I can see you in person.
Oh my gosh, that's so fun. I'll have to check that out. That's so exciting. Thank you so much for coming on, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the first episode of Season 2 of Pen to Pod. Similar to last season, the episodes will be coming out every other week with author interviews. As Veronica said, please go get yourself a copy of Difficult Girls, follow her on socials, and check out her website. I'm hoping to have in-between episodes for the off weeks of interviews just to take some time to chat with all of you about my writing. I haven't really been posting on YouTube this year. If you follow me at Mik Writes on my YouTube channel, which I feel like I'm most known for right now on the internet, but I've been keeping my drafting process really close to the chest this year. It has been a very interesting and difficult journey, to say the least, and I just wanted it to be for me. But I'm reaching the end, and I'm getting ready to kind of talk about this experience with you in retrospect, so I am hoping to, on the off weeks, just have a really quick chat with you guys about my writing process, where I'm at with my current work in progress, but still want the main focus of this season to be on the amazing author interviews that we have lined up. So thank you again for watching. If you have not, be sure to subscribe or follow this podcast wherever you are listening. So if you are watching on YouTube, you can subscribe to this channel. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can go ahead and give this a follow. That way you'll be notified for the next episode. See you all soon. Bye, writers.